sicuramente una base importante per la discussione che seguirà. Passo effettivamente la parola a Damien Rosset, se ci sente, se è collegato. Damien Rosset, che è ricercatore in scienze sociali, appunto tu prima citavi le scienze sociali. Michele, dovresti togliere il tuo PowerPoint, la funzione... Esatto, grazie. Dicevo, Damiano è ricercatore in scienze sociali presso l'Università di Neuchâtel. Abbiamo lavorato insieme in un centro di diritto delle migrazioni che ha appunto la sua sede all'Università di Neuchâtel in collaborazione con altre università a Berna e Friburgo. Damian ha appena concluso una tesi di dottorato molto esaustiva sul tema delle COI, investigando non soltanto il sistema svizzero, che come diceva all'inizio è un sistema peculiare, perché ci sono ben 2 unità COI, l'una a livello della SEM, che tu hai appena citato, Michele, la Segreteria di Stato alle Migrazioni, e l'altra a livello delle corti, quindi della magistratura. La tesi di Damiano è una tesi però intelligente, perché l'interrogativo che c'è dietro al suo lavoro è il seguente. Sono le COI, le unità COI, un sistema di legittimazione di una conoscenza, questa pretesa di obiettività, oggettivazione delle informazioni. È possibile, è raggiungibile, oppure le unità COI sono un apparato di giustificazione di decisioni? Damiano ha lavorato a questa tesi non soltanto da ricercatore, ma anche come operatore in una unità COI. Se adesso ci sta sentendo, gli lascerei la parola. Damiano molto coraggiosamente parlerà sulla base di un PowerPoint in italiano, ma si esprimerà in inglese, che è la lingua straniera maggiormente condivisa. Poi potremo rivolgervi domande in inglese o in francese, o qualcuno di noi farà da tramite eventualmente. Grazie Damiano, a te la parola.
Thank you very much. Flora, thank you very much to all the organizers, to everyone who is present today. I'm very excited to participate in this event. I don't think I have ever talked to so many people at once, and it's an issue that I have been working, as Flora said, for a while already, a few years during my PhD years, but also before that as a country analyst at the Federal Administrative Court. So it's really a pleasure, I must say. I was quite impressed with the whole explanation about your network on COI. I was really not aware that it was that it was such a large network involving so many people, and also so much involved in actual production of COI already. So yeah, it was also a bit exciting to understand that actually I will be talking to lawyers who are interested in my topic, which has not always been the case in Switzerland, I must say. And at the legal level in Switzerland, I think COI or COI is pretty much something that is taken for granted. There is not so much reflection from a legal point of view as to the importance of this instrument and its place in the asylum procedure, because probably there is, as Michele Connelly mentioned, a quite long tradition of having specialized units, and yeah, I think something that is just much more embedded within the system, and that I don't think it's ever really, or it's very rarely discussed from a legal point of view. So I'm quite excited that actually other people elsewhere maybe see the relevance of the topic as well. My presentation today, I will share my screen. There you go. Yeah. Is so based essentially on observation I made in the context of my thesis. I will start with a general discussion of COI as a type of expertise for refugee status determination and an essential tool in this context for the decision makers. It will be really short. I will then take a step back and consider the historical development of COI in the context of the bureaucratization and the Europeanization of asylum and asylum procedures in particular. I will then take a more abstract perspective, try to explain what I consider as the symbolic role of COI in the legitimation of asylum procedure, as Flora already mentioned. And I will then turn to the much more concrete question of COI national infrastructures in Europe, presenting in particular the way COI production is organized in the context of the Swiss asylum procedures, with an emphasis on the specificity of the two units system that Flora also mentioned. And finally, I will just quickly compare this to other examples of how COI resources are organized in other European contexts. From a social scientific perspective, maybe I will very quickly start by saying or to stating how I consider, how I approach COI. And I think it was very clear actually from the presentation of Michele Gonelli that COI stands for, or defines, a very well defined, a very sophisticated area of bureaucratic practices that is characterized by a very long, I mean, in terms of history, and also a deep, reflexive endeavor to define the boundaries, to define the methodologies, to define the role of this activity. And the widespread use of the acronym itself and all these derivatives like COI units, COI wrappers, COI standards, COI experts, COI you name it, just show how much this field has become an entity of its own. I think it's quite important to although it may be obvious for people who work today on COI, it may be useful to remind that it's something that has been constructed over time, and that is an objectivation or a reification that COI stands both for the specific type of expert knowledge that it refers to and the field of practices that deal with it. As I said that I was going to talk about the symbolic functions of COI, I will obviously start with the instrumental functions of COI. It seems from what I have heard before that these are things that everybody knows, so I will go very quickly through this, but I think one useful way to differentiate between the types of knowledges that COI provides to the asylum procedure and its actors is to define, to differentiate between knowledge of a general character that is linked to the general political, socio-economical situation in the country and for specific groups, and a much more specific ad hoc knowledge that has to do with the very particular circumstances of individual cases, especially to assess whether a person, the person in front of the decision maker actually belongs to one of these risk groups. It's therefore it's used in three main areas: the evaluation, the assessment of the credibility of the asylum seeker, the determination of the eligibility for international protection, and if it is not the case, also the evaluation of the possibility or the legality of deportation to the country of origin. What I would like to talk about now is about how, so as I said before, how it came, how this policy instrument came into being, and through a short historic lap. The history of COI as a specific field of expertise can be traced back to the late 1980s, so we would have about 30 years of history, because 30 years ago the first asylum administrations in Western European countries, but also in North America, created created within their asylum administrations specific documentation units that were tasked with the collection of different sources of information on countries of origin. Obviously, it looked nothing like today. There was obviously no, not comparable IT and information technology devices and resources. But they started, asylum administrations located the need to actually start and collect knowledge in a more systematic way, organizing libraries, getting subscriptions to different kind of reviews, journals, media outlets, etc., and organizing this knowledge in a very specific way. This creation and the further development of COI units is closely linked to two processes, two larger processes that characterize the field of asylum over the same period. That is the bureaucratization and Europeanization of asylum procedures. Bureaucratization is a process that that started in the context of the end of the Cold War. That's also the diversification of the origins of asylum seekers, also an increase in suspicion and public controversies about potential abuses of the asylum system. And it prompted the asylum administrations to develop their practices. It translated into an increasing insistence on the individual treatment of asylum claims, the complexification of investigation tools, also the rationalization of the whole processes that I mean by this, the division of labor, increased specialization on specific regions for the professionals of asylum administrations, and more technical training, evaluation for increasingly in order to create increasingly impartial procedures. It's importantly involved also the standardization of procedures, the interview techniques, and importantly for us, the use of expert knowledge, as well as the development of identification and verification of documents, which should become increasingly used as evidence. And since then, and this is a process that that several historians and social scientists locate in during the 1980s, depending on which country we are talking about. It could come a bit later, but it has been a quite long process to start. But it is actually something that we can still observe, and ever since there have been significant resources, knowledge and techniques to also increasingly assess the credibility of asylum application in a climate of general suspicions towards the claim. And I think COI can very much be considered as an emanation of bureaucratization, but also a catalyst of it, because as one of these expert tools, it has also gained prominence. It's really quite striking how its importance has increased regularly over the years. And one of the drivers in Europe of this increase has been the European dimension of COI, if you will. I think Michele Gonelli mentioned the goal of EASO of aiming for a convergence of analysis on the countries of origin. The idea behind it is that it would lead to a convergence on the interpretation of this knowledge, and thus convergence on the practices towards certain countries of origin, which has been a big issue for the asylum systems in Europe for almost as long as the COI units exist. When we talk about the CAS, it was created by the Treaty of Amsterdam in 1999, but actually the need to have equivalent asylum procedures, the idea that recognition rates should be similar and or comparable between countries dates back to the implementation of the first Dublin regulation already in 1990. And that explains why the EU has been also very proactive long before the creation of EASO in 2011. It has created networks to foster, to promote cooperation on COI. Already in the 90s with the CIREA, then in the 2000s, also through other networks, Eurasil, the European country sportsmanship. There have been different projects at different levels. So the EU has become a prominent actor. I would say there was an acceleration in between 1999 and 2004. These were the 5 years during which the Treaty of Amsterdam required to have to implement the CAS, and these years were very, very intense. That's also in terms of trainings, events, first formalized methodological documents already. And it's also, by the way, the period when practitioners start using in documents the acronym COI. And importantly, it concludes with the publication of the first EU qualification directive, which also, as Michele Gonelli mentioned, actually sets the first for the first time, the legal obligation to use COI in the assessment of asylum claims. So if we look at this development from the sociological aspect, we can also observe that obviously over time, the development of COI has been accompanied with the development of a densely connected community of practice. The international cooperation at many levels has always been very strong and intense between COI units, whether bilateral or multilateral, formalized in some kinds of agreements or in very informal settings. Claudia Engelmann called these networks an epistemic community. I use the notion of a transnational guild, but basically it's important to keep in mind that this development also was accompanied by the development of a shared set of understandings when it comes to the task, the values, the objective, the challenges, the craft of country of origin information. I also observed feelings of belonging and the quite strong personal bonds enabling solidarity at a distance. And from the perspective of these actors, I think the collaboration on setting common standards, Michele Gonelli mentioned the last EU standard, EASO standards published in 2019. And probably many of you know that the first guidelines at the European level were published in 2008 and were really created, produced through by the COI units themselves in collaboration, both as a tool of affirming the area of expertise of COI, as well as a practical step to set minimal standards to allow and foster information exchange. So looking at this development and the standardization of COI, I think it is also relevant to identify its symbolic aspects. There is it's based on a framework proposed by Christina Boswell, who is a political scientist from the University of Edinburgh, and she says she studied different political uses of expert knowledge in the context of migration policies in Europe, and showed that besides the instrumental function of expert knowledge, where decision makers use knowledge as a tool for rational problem solving based on facts, expert knowledge can also at the same time exert two kinds of symbolic functions. The first is to substantiate political preferences. So in this case, the production of knowledge fits policy preferences or is only used when it corresponds to the preferences of policymakers. And the second symbolic function is to legitimize the policy process itself. In my opinion, there is really no evidence to suggest that COI units have been used to substantiate policy preferences. There has been quite, if you look at the history of COI, there have been really few actual controversies over COI. There have been many controversies about the interpretation of COI or country conditions, but I cannot think of many controversies over reports themselves, except for one that was produced on Eritrea a few years ago, in 2014, I think, by the Danish COI unit. But even then, it ended up without any actual consequence. So there's probably not much to see in this direction. However, there clearly is a COI, a legitimizing function that COI serves by showcasing that decisions that reference them are well-informed, rational, thus affirming the legitimacy of policy actors and the institutions that are involved in it. And in my opinion, this is particularly important in the highly sensitive and politicized context of asylum, because COI reinforces the objectivity, not only of the decision making itself, but also of the contestation of asylum policies. When NGOs contest the point of COI, they do not contest the point of its interpretation, and vice versa. When they criticize a policy, they do not criticize necessarily the expertise that it is based on. And I think that in this case, it also the existence and the development of COI has created a setting where the contestation of asylum or of asylum policies per se is hampered or is diluted by the discussion on technicalities, and therefore I think there are these two aspects that are quite important to get linked with COI. One is the technicization that I just mentioned through the increasing quality standards and quality control. And there's on the other side the question of distance and the distanciation, the way COI units have managed to become, as I said before, an area of expert knowledge in its own right, but also therefore somehow disconnected from the whole process of which it serves in the asylum procedure. And I think this norm of separation of the production of COI from its interpretation, and Michele Gonelli also mentioned that, saying, talking about the fact that COI is not sorry, I just saw the messages. Okay, I'm a bit late. There is no risk evaluation. So I will not go into the details of how this distancing works, but in my opinion, there's something really interesting in the way it is communicated, and that's very important. COI units have become very efficient at communicating the way they work, at communicating their reports, at publishing increasingly big amounts of their own production, and in this way also finding a way to legitimize themselves beyond the context. Now, very quickly about the Swiss COI infrastructure, because that's what I was invited to talk about. So I will take 2 minutes to talk about this. So as I said, there are two units in the Swiss system. One is in the Secretariat for State Secretariat for Migration, the SEM. It is located. That's one of this mechanism of distanciation. It is not located in the asylum decision-making units, but in a separate organizational chart. It has 10, maybe now 11 country analysts. They produce several kinds of reports that actually mirrors what Michele Gonelli explained about the EASO reports a lot, so I'm not going to go into it. They have an internal data bank for COI, and they participate in different COI networks, the Intergovernmental Consultation for Migration and Asylum, for example, or the EASO, obviously. And some of the reports can be found under the address that I mentioned. The other unit is smaller. It's based at the tribunal. It has 5 country analysts who are all social anthropologists. They produce similar reports, but the difference to the SEM COI unit, I would say, is the important difference is that they are not connected to other COI units. They work quite independently, and they also don't publish their reports, so it's not accessible. So the system, that's a way to make it civil. The system, the COI unit at the SEM produces knowledge for the RSD decision makers. The knowledge they produce is accessible to the judges and to the other COI unit at the tribunal. And the COI unit at the tribunal produces research for the judges and the clerks, has access to the information from the lower court, the lower instance, but they don't share their own information with the lower instance. And I think that's quite important. Also considering the next, the particularity of having 2 COI units. And and what does it mean in terms of knowledge production, and what happens when they disagree, and what is the role of the court. And there you have, it's actually, there is a tension in the jurisprudence of the court itself, which sometimes says we have a full power to interpret the factual, we have the factual situation, we have our own COI units, so so we can actually define what is the situation, issue guidance on country of origin in our decisions. They do that in those Länderurteile, which are really which define the situation for a country for a while until it's overruled by another Länderurteil. And in other cases, it say no, it's not our role to actually. Our role is to control the knowledge production, is to control the administration, but not to impose it ourselves. Other countries have had that, and they all decided to actually keep only one COI unit, usually in the administration, except for France. France has the same system as Switzerland, or a comparable one. And very quickly, I will just show this. These are just two other systems with the same system of arrows, that who accesses what information, who can ask COI units what, and I think this is pretty. It's important to realize that in the uniformization of COI in Europe, one thing that has not been uniformized, and it's very different from country to country, is the location of COI infrastructure within the system itself. And I'm very, very sorry to have. I thought that I didn't have enough to say, and I ended up talking way too long. So please apologize, accept my apologies, and thank you very much for your attention.
Grazie Damian. Innanzitutto sei stato coraggiosissimo ad ascoltare gli interventi precedenti in italiano, visto che hai seguito bene l'intervento di Michele. I vostri interventi erano complementari dal punto di vista tecnico. Ovviamente ti faremo poi dopo delle domande, però vorrei mettere subito l'accento su un passaggio iniziale che hai fatto e che mi ha colpito, e cioè hai detto all'inizio i giuristi in Svizzera mettono poco in discussione il lavoro delle unità COI, le informazioni sono date per scontate. Allora ti chiederò dopo se questo dare per buone le informazioni che vengono prodotte, le COI che vengono prodotte dalle differenti unità, è dovuta a una fiducia della popolazione svizzera verso le autorità, oppure si tratta effettivamente di un lavoro ben fatto. Dopo ti ripeterò la domanda in francese o in inglese, ok? Grazie. Allora, adesso se il consigliere Di Marco è in linea, sì, lo vedo, ci piacerebbe avere il punto di vista di un magistrato e capire qual è l'impatto del sistema informativo italiano sull'operato degli organi inquirenti. I miei studenti hanno avuto già il piacere di ascoltarla qualche tempo fa e anche lo scorso anno. Lei ci sta seguendo da un anno in questo tentativo di avviare una clinica sul tema delle COI, e noi le siamo molto grati. Vorremmo capire appunto quali sono le lacune, le problematiche alle quali siete ogni volta confrontati come organi inquirenti. Poi avremo magari l'opportunità di ascoltare altri suoi colleghi che ci stanno seguendo. Quindi le passo la parola e la ringrazio di aver accettato questo invito.
Ringrazio io della possibilità di partecipare a questo incontro che mi avete dato, che è estremamente interessante e forse anche più proficuo fatto con queste modalità via web, perché consentono a molte più persone agevolmente di partecipare da casa loro, anche se mi manca molto la stretta di mano, che così virtualmente non si può fare. Le problematiche credo che siano state già esaminate da quella che è stata la prima relazione tecnica che ho sentito, e mi permetterò allora di fare una piccola parabola che sembrerà ai suoi alunni strana come quelle che si sentono sulle sugli agnelli e sul grano, perché benché si riferisce al secolo scorso è già desueta, e praticamente il giudice civile è abituato a fare le fotografie con una Kodak, mentre invece in questo caso lo dobbiamo fare con la Polaroid. E mi spiego, normalmente noi ricerchiamo una verità che si è già verificata nel passato, e quindi quando una volta si faceva la fotografia con la Kodak, quando si vedevano le fotografie, dopo un mese si guardavano le foto di un evento che si ricostruiva l'estate passata insieme. Invece in questo caso bisogna sapere qual è, come dicevamo, come è stato detto prima correttamente, in base all'articolo 4.3 delle direttive qualifiche, lettera A, qual è la situazione in questo momento del paese di provenienza, nel momento della decisione. Quindi diciamo nell'ultimo trimestre dobbiamo fare una Polaroid, dobbiamo fare uno scatto di quello che c'è attualmente. Per cui nel momento stesso in cui la COI, redatta dalle ASO, dall'UNHCR, il rapporto di Amnesty International sull'Africa subsahariana, viene scritto, si riferisce ad un fatto accaduto 1 o 2 anni prima e automaticamente è obsoleto in relazione alla decisione che bisogna prendere. Quindi la vera problematica è quella che le decisioni debbano essere sempre all'attualità, e la difficoltà quindi di trovare notizie attuali o di aggiornare le COI che esistono sul paese o su specifiche possibilità al momento in cui viene presa la decisione. Facile fare degli esempi. Se è in corso in questo momento un'epidemia di coronavirus anche in un paese subsahariano, tutti i parametri che possono essere stati scritti 3 mesi fa saltano, perché probabilmente dovremmo dire che quelle persone hanno diritto ad una protezione umanitaria, perché non c'è un sistema sanitario che le potrebbe proteggere in questo momento nel caso del ritorno, non so, faccio l'esempio in Guinea o in Costa d'Avorio. E quindi tutto quello che si è scritto fino a gennaio su quei 2 paesi può non servire o servire poco ai fini della decisione. Per cui la necessità di un aggiornamento costante e continuo, e quindi la necessità di una rete che raccolga costantemente e continuamente le notizie e modifichi di volta in volta quelle parti che vanno modificate. E qui c'è chiaramente per l'organo giudicante una difficoltà a ricercare da soli queste notizie, che molto distingue l'attendibilità della fonte che viene ricercata, e a trovare anche notizie che molto spesso per determinati paesi non sono riportate in lingua italiana, ma sono in gran parte in francese o in inglese, a seconda di quella che è la lingua madre di quel. E la rilevanza poi ed affrontare poi la rilevanza di quella notizia sulla situazione di un certo paese. Faccio solo un esempio per dire da una banalità. Si discute, o almeno nel nostro ufficio si discute molto sulla situazione, scena nel concreto, del Casamance, che è una regione meridionale del Senegal, quasi non in continuità territoriale con il resto del paese, e quindi con una strisciante forma di ribellismo, di guerriglia. A un certo punto può darsi che trovo la notizia che si è aperta una nuova autostrada che attraversa il Togo e c'è un ponte sul fiume Togo, come questo evento modifica quindi la situazione socioculturale, i diritti umani, la realtà economica di quella zona del Senegal. Quindi questa è la prima problematica. La seconda problematica è la specificità delle domande. Molto spesso ci vengono raccontate delle situazioni o il narrato riguardo delle situazioni estremamente specifiche a cui è difficile dare una risposta. Anche qua credo che un esempio che avevo già fatto in altre occasioni in cui ho parlato, il racconto di quello che è sfuggito, perché il soggetto, che era un attivista di un ONG che si occupava di vaccinazioni nel Punjab, che è una zona del Pakistan, dove in un paese molto grande la situazione può essere molto diversa da quelle che sono le province tribali, cioè quelle nord occidentali, da quello che è il Punjab, che invece è la provincia nord orientale. E via proseguendo, la situazione di conflitti tra allevatori e coltivatori in una determinata zona di un paese dell'Africa subsahariana, che può sembrare diciamo alla maggior parte delle persone un fatto ridicolo, ma invece potrebbe essere una cosa estremamente fondata, o potrebbe essere un dato di fatto da tenere in considerazione. Per cui molto spesso quelle che sono appunto le COI, le fonti ufficiali, quelle che possono essere ricavabili nell'esame, non è sufficiente ad arrivare ad una decisione, e di qui quindi l'utilità e la necessità della collaborazione con gli studenti, o meglio ancora, apprendo oggi, da una rete integrata di cliniche legali che permettano quindi di mantenere costantemente aggiornata la situazione di determinati paesi. Per dire, quelli che vengono in esame a Napoli sono quasi tutti provenienti dalla zona dell'Africa subsahariana, ma probabilmente è solo attraverso una rete di questo genere è possibile dare decisioni che siano quanto più conformi al diritto dei soggetti che fanno richiesta di protezione o di asilo. Va bene.
Allora, si era disattivato il microfono, la ringrazio molto, perché come sempre lei è molto chiaro, molto schietto e molto accessibile, quindi insomma credo che il suo messaggio sia arrivato a tutti. Ovviamente poi le